Good morning, everybody. We're going to get our session started. For those new to the room, we're going to be doing simultaneous translation. So if you're a monolingual English or monolingual Spanish speaker, we're going to ask that you please get the equipment to translate. Our translators are in the back here. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our panel, Building Together CLT Tenant Organizer Collaborations. Nice. Before we get started, it's always good to know sort of who's in the room. So I'd love to see a show of hands if you are part of a CLT staff. Okay. Are you on a CLT board? Okay. CLT residents. Are you part of the funder community, philanthropic arm, CDFI bank? Nice. Anybody from the public sector? Okay. Okay, great. So this session is all about how early and sustained collaboration between CLTs and tenant organizers can lay the groundwork for strong community-rooted CLTs. When we center resident leadership in collective action from the very beginning, we're not just building housing, we're building power, we're building trust, we're building long-term stability. Today, our panelists will share firsthand experiences about what it actually takes to make those collaborations work, how to build trust, how to partner with residents in a way that puts them in the driver's seat, and how to navigate some of the real challenges that can come up, from bridging different organizational cultures, balancing urgent housing crises with the slower work of long-term stewardship. We'll also surface some practical tools and strategies that you can take back to your own communities. We want this to be a session that will focus on tangible, practical solutions. We're especially thrilled to be joined by two resident leaders from the South Bay who will share their own experiences organizing with their CLT. But we had also hoped to have residents join from both SFCLT and Bay Area CLT. It's always good to hear from residents directly on a panel about resident organizing. But it wasn't in the cards for this session for reasons we won't get into. In lieu of their participation, we will be sharing videos where they'll tell their stories in their own words. So here's how we'll spend our time together. First, we'll hear from each of our panelists as they share their stories of collaboration and some of their key takeaways. Then we'll move into a moderated Q&A where we'll dig a little deeper. And then finally, we'll open it up for audience questions and discussions. With that, I'll remind myself that I haven't even introduced myself. I'm Kyle from the San Francisco Community Land Trust. I'm the policy director. We're very excited for this panel today. I'll go ahead and turn it right over to our friends from the South Bay.
So, my name is Delma Hernandez. I'm an organizing co-director with the South Bay Community Land Trust. And yeah, I just want to share a little bit about South Bay Community Land Trust. We were founded in 2019 out of a long history of community organizing for housing and survival. And we were born out of fighting against gentrification and the sale of public land, like Google's campus announcement in 2017. And we realized that we need just a different way to be able to protect our community, our to be able to protect our working class, our low income community, our unhoused community. And yeah, we CLT came about. South Bay CLT came about in 2019, so we're now 6 years old. And we're based in San Jose. And we were able to acquire our very first property. It's a 4-unit property in downtown San Jose in early 2023. And this year, with the leadership of the residents, tenant residents and East Side San Jose, like organizing, we were also in collaboration as well with Midpen Housing and those BAFA REAP funds were able to acquire 18-unit property Virginia Avenue in East Side San Jose. And with that, I'll go ahead and allow for the residents, María García Hernández y también Marisela Betancourt Flores, que se puedan presentar. They can introduce themselves. They can share a little bit more of themselves, of their neighbors, the residents, the 18 families, and also share a little bit of just the long journey that it took. It took us about a little bit more than 3 years to acquire, but it was definitely a fight. The community, came together and to organize. So I'll pass it along to Maria y Marisela.
Sí, hola, buenas tardes.
Good
Les dije, mi
afternoon.
nombre es María
Like I said,
García.
my name is Maria Garcia, and I'm a
Desde ahí los
resident of
apartamentos Virginia.
the Virginia
Ya
apartments.
llevo
I've been living there for
14 años.
14 years
Soy
now.
una, a lo mejor de las últimas que llegó
Maybe one of
porque los
the ones that
ya tienen todavía más años.
there
Hablan de
the least amount of
20,
time.
30
Some of them
años.
have been there for
Todos
20, 30 years.
ya nos conocemos
We
bien
all know each
ahí.
other really well.
En las 18 unidades que
In the
son,
18 units,
tenemos ahorita una buena
we
relación
have a good
porque
relationship
siempre tratamos de compartir
because we always try to,
una buena
share
amistad
and have a
todos.
good friendship and get along.
También, pues, cuando nosotros escuchamos
And when
del
we
fideicomiso,
heard about land
en
trust
ese tiempo
back then,
el terreno estaba a la venta y,
and
pues
the
ellos
property
llegaron
was
con
for
esta
sale,
idea de
and
decir,
they
vamos
came
a
with this
pelear por
idea, let's
este
fight for this,
terreno.
let's fight for this property.
Nosotros nos sentimos medios, ¿cómo se dice?
I don't know how to say it, how would you say
Sí,
that word?
llenos de dudas,
We had so many
de
doubts.
pensar que podíamos perder
We thought
ese lugar
we're
donde
gonna
nosotros
lose
ya
this
teníamos
spot. We've been
bastante
living here
tiempo.
for so long.
Entonces, ellos empezaron a unir con todos y hablaban y a reuniones y todo, y nos llevaron al concilio también para estar pidiendo por esa tierra. Fue una lucha casi
It was
pues, de
quite a
3
fight.
años que estuvimos ahí yendo, presentando nuestras historias de
And we
cuánto
were
tiempo
presenting our
vivimos, que
stories,
realmente
how long
queríamos
we were
quedarnos en
there.
ese lugar.
So
Y pues a los concejales o a la mesa
And the
directiva no
council
les
member.
quedó de otra, que después dieron luz verde. Y ya fue como ellos igual pudieron acceder al terreno. Y pues yo estoy muy contenta
So I am
porque
very
ahora ya
happy
sé que puedo tener un techo donde
because now I
dormir
know I have a
y
roof,
nadie
a place
me
to stay,
puede
and nobody can
desalojar.
ask
Esa
me
es
to
una
leave.
parte que es gratificante y
And
doy
that is so
gracias a todo el
gratifying.
equipo.
And I want to thank everybody, to the entire team. Thank you.
Buenos días.
Good morning.
Marisela
My name is
Betancourt.
Marisela Betancourt Flores,
Estoy muy orgullosa de estar aquí.
and I am very proud to be here.
Invitada
I was invited
para representar
to
a las
represent
18 familias de
the
los
18
apartamentos
families of the
Virginia.
Virginia apartments.
Como dijeron mis compañeras,
And like my colleague said,
no fue muy fácil llegar
it wasn't
hasta aquí.
easy to be here.
Fue mucha lucha,
It was a fight,
constante,
a constant battle.
pero yo con mi propia experiencia quiero
But with
pedir
my own
que cuando
experience,
ustedes hablen con los
I want to
concejales,
tell you, when
con
you talk
las
to
personas
the
correctas
council members, with the right people,
para hacer la petición de lo que están pidiendo,
so that if you have a
como
request,
vecinos se unan.
as
Muy
neighbors
importante
get
que todos
together, it is
ellos
very
escuchen
important for all of them to hear,
el proyecto de la propia historia de cada uno de nosotros.
the story from your own
Vaya un representante a
perspective.
hablar
It's not the same
sobre
for a
proyecto.
representative to come and
Y
talk
otra
about the
cosa es
project,
que ellos
but it is a different
escuchen
thing
la
for them to
historia
hear
del
it
Cristo,
from you, to hear your own
porque
story,
está hablando de
because
corazón.
you're saying
Entonces,
it from your
creo
heart.
que también ahí es momento para ellos
So I
ablandarles
think it's
también un poquito
important
su
for them,
corazón y
that's an
que tomen en
opportunity
cuenta
for
que
them.
nos pueden ayudar. Así serían muchas
And
menos familias de las que estaremos desplazadas de nuestras
so if you
viviendas.
do that, there will be a lot less families being
Eh,
displaced.
Y pues no se dejen convencer, luchen por sus sueños
Don't
y
let them intimidate you
estamos
or
aquí
convince you.
dando nuestro propio
We're
testimonio de
here
que sí se
sharing our
puede.
testimony
Muchas
that it is
gracias.
possible. Thank you.
Pero
Como comentaron acá mis compañeras,
Sit over here, my colleagues, Virginia.
es hogar de residentes
It's some
ya,
residents
ya
that
de ahí por
have lived there
bastante
for
tiempo,
many
ya
years.
sus lazos se dan
They have their ties. They're in
tienen
Virginia
como
apartments,
mencionaron de
like they mentioned.
14
They
a
have
30
14
años,
to
donde
30
ya
years
tienen,
where
también nietos que han
they have
crecido ahí.
grandchildren that have grown.
Entonces, parte de, y,
So part of,
y
and
ellos mencionan
they
que nosotros
mentioned that
vamos al
we
consejo,
took them to
pero yo
the
digo que
council members, but I say that they
porque,
took us because
porque, y también quiero
then I also want
mencionar
to
que yo
mention
empecé un
that I
poquito
started
como
a little bit like an employee,
un
maybe
poquito más tarde, pero
more later, but I want to mention to my colleagues, Liz and Jackie, that they started,
conocen a Jackie Rivera,
you know, Jackie Rivera, right? They started,
Liz,
and Liz, they started
con los vecinos de
the-
Virginia,
with the neighbors
en
of
donde
Virginia,
con ellos
where they
acerca de
spoke
la
to them
situación,
about the
qué es lo que está
situation,
pasando, y
what's
también
happening,
ofrecieron
they
bastante
offered
también talleres de
workshops, also educational workshops like of their
se
rights,
comunicaron también
and they
con
communicated with
los residentes también
the
querían saber
residents that they want.
The residents also wanted to know, as Maria mentioned, is this even real? And so they wanted to connect with other community land trust residents. And we were able to connect with Veteran or Not CLT, with Señoras for Housing, where we learned of their story. And another key part, something super key for Virginia residents was also to highlight and elevate their stories, their roots here in San Jose, in East San Jose. And that part we did in many different ways, from inviting the city council members to the apartments, to meet the residents, to meet the property, to understand why it was so important to preserve this community and to meet the folks that they represent at city council. We also went to city council to them as well. We also made zines, like little magazines, to include the youth, to ensure that everyone living in Virginia is involved, and to show and be able to show why and how this place is home for us. Another important thing that I want to share is something fundamental that Liz and Jackie did from the beginning. A value that was included in the communication was collective decision making with the residents. And an example of that collective decision making was after maybe 3 to 5 meetings with the residents. We wanted to know whether the residents wanted to continue and collaborate with the Community Land Trust for this purchase, to fight for this acquisition. And so Liz and Jackie asked the residents, how do you want the process to look? How do you want the vote to look? Do you want 100% of the 18 units to vote in favor, or are you okay with 51%? And all the residents voted that they wanted 100% of the approval from the 18 units in order to move forward. And so during one of those meetings, all 18 units had a representative vote, and there was 100% approval. And so that is how we moved forward with this. And so I think that was a key step and a key example of, collective decision making, that we all need to be, on the same page. I want to also point out, and something that I learned, something that I want to mention, or the reason why we went to City Council, was because City Council in 2020, the residents of San Jose passed a Measure E specifically for affordable housing, and every year the mayor proposes to deviate those funds. And so in 2023, when we were going to apply for those funds for the purchase of Virginia, the original funds were about 23 million under this fund, specifically for acquisition and rehabilitation. And so we thought, oh, easy, like we'll be able to apply for these funds and, be able to do the acquisition and rehab. But then the mayor, in his budget proposal for the budget cycle that year, he basically proposed to move it to other projects, leaving it basically to zero. And so that was going to leave us with nothing for this project. And so we notified the tenants of this, and they're the ones that took the decision on like having us advocate and having us, fight for those funds. And they told us, we need to fight for these. We need to invite the city council members. We need to share our testimonies and share our experiences. And we need to ensure that these funds need to be protected. At the end, thanks to the voice and power of the resident voices, we were able to protect 5 million of those funds, and that helped us. Originally, that was supposed to be towards the purchase of the property, but we also were able to tap into the BAFA funds, the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority, and where we also applied for 4.5 million. And since the city was taking a really long time to disperse the funds, they're still taking a really long time to disperse the funds. We actually used the BAFA funds for the purchase, and we're waiting now for the city funds in order to do the rehabilitation. During this waiting period, during this fight that we were able to protect those 5 million funds, there was a time where we were waiting for the city, and like, where are we gonna get the other funds? Before we had known about BAFA, like, we were trying to figure out with the residents, like, what is gonna happen. We were sharing with the residents, notifying them, and kind of sharing the different like barriers that were coming up, and we were informing them. And something that I learned is that in the resident meetings, I was really trying to be positive. I was trying to share like, no, yes, we're going to win. We're going to be able to move forward. But honestly, I learned that, we need to be vulnerable. We need to share our frustrations, that this is the reality. This is the situation we're in. Because the residents, after they had helped protect those 5 million, they were kind of also having a lot of questions about, well, what is going on? And again, we need to be vulnerable. Here in this photo towards the corner is when we had that conversation of being vulnerable, of sharing about our frustrations. And we did an activity together to talk about what is our North Star. How do we identify as our North Star? Like, when we're frustrated, like, what helps us stay motivated? What helps us stay grounded? And that conversation also helped us launch the People's Preservation Fund, which is a community fund. So we don't always have to be waiting for the city government, to disperse funds, but to ensure that our community has funds. We've been able to fundraise about $150,000 from the community. That has helped us close the gaps of the closing cost of Virginia. And again, because the property is from 1960, constructed in 1960, this fund has also helped us meet like the urgent and immediate fixes while we await major rehabilitation to start. And so that's all I'd like to share. Again, thank you again to Maria and Marisela.
We give it up again for Delma, Maria, Marisela. Mariela? Mariela. Yeah. All right. We figure this out for a second. There we go. Okay. So my name is Matt Gustafson. I'm the organizational director with the Bay Area Community Land Trust. I'm just going to hold this too tall for that. And my background is in resident organizing in East San Jose with Somos Mayfair, around with immigrant families mostly, including neighbors of Maria Marisela, and around housing justice and housing policy advocacy in San Jose. And so prior to working at Bay Area CLT. Bay Area CLT has been around for 19 years. It's based in Berkeley, California. We've got 130 residents across 10 different properties. Paula is here. Paula's one of our resident board members. Give it up for Paula. Bay Area CLT really emerged out of a desire to like have a way to facilitate tenant like affordable cooperative ownership under a stewardship model that was like long-term community control. And so we have cooperative roots. I think from the beginning, Bay Area CLT has really prioritized like if we're going to work with residents to take a building off of the market, it's the long-term goal is going to be collective ownership. And so that's kind of the frame that we've always had. Every one of our resident groups is at somewhere along the pathway toward cooperative development and resident management and tenant governance. So I really love this conversation because, you know, there's a piece of it that's like within the CLT, what is resident ownership and collective tenant governance and organizing look like? And then there's also outside of CLTs, what is tenant organizing and collective power look like? How do those things kind of match together? So I think we'll get to some of those themes during the questions afterwards. But today, I'm really just sharing about one specific project that was the most recent acquisition of this phenomenal group of residents in South Berkeley. I think we shared about this. Oh, you all saw a little video preview yesterday too. So you know a little bit of the story. These are just some slides. We actually shared about this at last year's conference and was like, we're working with these residents. We're hoping to buy the building. Good news, it all worked out. It's going great. And so today, I'm going to let Bridget on video recording share more about the story of like what actually happened in the history of the tenants in the project.
My name is Bridget Cooper, and I actually live in Berkeley. So my story is, you know, kind of a different, unique, but all the same. I live in a building that was built back in the 1960s by a Black man who was, you know, just trying to pave a way and own property and stuff. So he owned quite like 6 or 7 different properties from San Francisco, Oakland, and Berkeley. The thing about him was that his idea was to do it and keep low rent for the community, right? And, you know, part of that was people of color, basically, you know, and so he ended up passing away and the building got transferred over to his daughter, who kept his legacy going in the sense of keeping low rent, you know, for everyone. And unfortunately, she passed away without a will. So what ended up happening was the brother from 30 years off, you know, comes into the picture for the probate and all of that for the property. And he came into the property and he promised us in the beginning that he was not going to sell and he was going to, you know, kind of be there for us and things. And then, you know, as soon as everything started coming out of probate, you know, then he started talking about selling the building. And so we knew that that would mean that it would go to, and he was looking at developers or investors to purchase the building, which would have meant that we would be put out. Basically, they would probably try to tear down, rebuild, or do, you know, anything to keep us from being able to live there. So my neighbor Inti and I and several of the other the Wormsleys and several other people, we got together trying to figure out what could we do to save our building. And with that, we Inti was able to have the time. We went and talked with Berkeley Land Trust, and they were interested in our case, and they got involved, and they started helping us, and we started going into city council meetings, and all of the things that we needed to do to help to get help for for to purchase this building. And we're just so excited that we were able to do that, because as part of that, we become co-owners. So we're turning our building into a co-op, and they're educating us on how to be a co-op, all the things we need to do. Everyone is, going together. We're in the process of CCFP meetings and all the necessary things that comes with being a part of the co-op. So I'm very excited to be here tonight as well. And, this is something that needs to continue to happen. The rent are just outrageous. I don't even know, how they expect people to continue to be able to afford to live. If we don't get some sort of control on this situation, there'll be more homeless out there. So, but I'm excited to be here tonight, and I hope everybody, get a chance to learn something, and we could all help each other figure out how this can be in your community, or how we can help lead and guide other places to be able to be wealthy, to get wealthy.
If y'all could go, there's another shorter clip on the next slide. Can you play that one too?
I don't know. I think just trying to get everybody on board, and we all excited about this, but then not to forget to still talk to everybody, and just getting everybody to understand the urgency and for us, because we were at the process of trying to keep the building from going on the market, for people to see that it's a short sale. So we were trying to, get, Berkeley Land Trust and the landlord together before we actually put it on the market. And then starting to get other people involved in the complex to show up at the town hall meetings, and, gathering and doing that. And we needed to be showing up in numbers. So I think that, that was, in the beginning, was a challenge. But once everybody got on board with this, a lot of that kind of goes by the wayside, and everybody just started becoming more excited about what this process would be and how we could make this work.
All right, give it up for Bridget. Okay. So, just to frame a little more sort of context and reflections around this particular story of resident organizing, I think some things that were really important that Bridget, you heard her mention, was like the community partnerships and connections were the only way that they found us. East Bay Community Law Center is who they approached and said, hey, we feel like we're all going to get displaced. Can you help us out? And they said, hey, we actually know about a land trust in the neighborhood, and we're going to connect you. And that's how we got connected. Without that, they would have never found us. We would have never found them. And so I think what's really, really, really critical in this whole thing is like, how do we find each other? How do we find each other? There are so many. Part of the reason we made that little video, by the way, that y'all saw yesterday, is so that all the residents in the same situation around the Bay Area, I mean, y'all are free to use this video too, can know that this is an option for them if they're in a situation like this. We have a co-op program and toolkit that we've been like more formalizing and systematizing over the last year, since we finally have a co-op program manager like full time. Rebecca, she's amazing. You should meet her if you haven't already. She's also a resident of the Bay Area CLT. She's been for like 5 or 6 years. And so having a very like thoughtful like map and a curriculum to like walk residents through towards self-management. There's like so many different pieces in terms of like governance and budgeting and collective decision making and committees and all of this stuff. It's really, really helpful to have like steps along the way toward collective governance that are not just like okay, one day you don't do it, the next day you're full owners, good luck, right? So it's like it's very much of a process and it takes years to really develop that. And if you're curious to understand more than like nuts and bolts and the nitty-gritty, Paula can share more because her building's like what, 2 years into this? Um, so I would say too, like in terms of the tactics, like you saw and Bridget shared a little bit about, this is a picture from city council meetings. And so, you know, in Berkeley, luckily we have a small sites program that is like dedicated funds for housing preservation, which is the only way that we could have bought that building. All of the residents of California Street showed up multiple times in the front of the faces of city council members in an election year, in a budget cycle to say, look at us. We are going to be displaced out of this community and we are this community. You cannot let us fall. You have to put money into this program so that we can buy this building. And it worked. It worked. So, I think like to me, this is very much like an interconnected um, system of power of like holding public officials accountable and actually getting what we're trying to get, and the tenant organizing, like luckily folks, we didn't have to coach anybody, right? There is so much leadership already within the group of residents and trust that folks know how to show up at a city council meeting and make demands. Like it's great. We got really lucky. I mean, there's so many tensions. We could do an entire session on just the tensions with tenant organizing, but a few things that just to flag, and then I'll hand it over to Kyle in a second, is that the like kind of explaining what a CLT is to a group of residents is pretty complicated and can get really confusing. And so that's a tension I think for all of us in the movement of like, how do we have this conversation so that people can like understand what we're trying to do and not misunderstand? Because this is another tension of like, when you talk about collective ownership and affordability, there's a lot of kind of assumptions that get made, or like it can sound misleading of like you're going to own and manage your building, and then you have all these uh, lender requirements and city requirements and other things that are like, oh, actually you can't decide what your rents are going to be, and you actually have to save a bunch of money and you can't spend it on urgent needs this year, and you have to wait 3 years till maybe the roof needs to be replaced. So I think just like the initial expectations up front is a pretty major tension and like can go a long way towards having trust, which you're going to need in the long run, or, and we are experiencing a lot of fallout from this now recently, of like those conversations didn't happen with a lot of our resident groups in the past. And so now, you know, that that mistrust festers and like it gets really difficult later down the road. So thank you. I want to hand it over to Kyle with SFCLT.
Give it up for Matt. All right. So I am going to share the story of one of our more recent acquisitions. Before that, my name is Kyle. I'm from the San Francisco Community Land Trust, and we've been around since 2003. Our model involves finding buildings with long-term residents who may be at risk of displacement. We step in, we purchase the buildings, and we turn them into permanently affordable housing. And our model involves transitioning those residents on a path to cooperative ownership. Our most recent acquisition was here in the Mission District. Before I get into that, I think it's important to start with sort of the bigger picture. That is an actor named the Veritas Investment Group. Folks may know them. Go ahead and give it up for them. They are, as a lot of folks know, one of the worst of the worst. They're a huge corporate landlord. They're known for having terrible conditions in their building. And in response to that, in 2017, a group of tenant organizers created the Veritas Tenants Association, and they helped a lot of the Veritas residents organize in their building, including at 14th Street. So building by building across the city, tenant associations formed. They held meetings. They started fighting back, and they had a major milestone in 2022 when they helped pass the Union at Home ordinance. This gave tenant associations collective bargaining rights and recognized their organizing efforts as an essential service. And we'll get into a bit of more of that later. One of the buildings that formed a union at home was at 320 14th Street. This is a 16-unit apartment building in the Mission District. Tenants were living with mold, leaks, other persistent problems, and like many others in the Veritas Tenants Association, they took action. In 2022, they joined a rent strike. They used their collective power to demand repairs and fair treatment. Then came a big shift. In 2023, Veritas defaulted on a huge portfolio of their properties, including 14th Street. That portfolio was sold to Prado Group, another corporate landlord. They were slightly better than Veritas. They did some of the repairs, but problem remained. They were still a private corporate landlord. The profit motive was to squeeze as much out of the residents as they could. So the residents reached out to us all the way back in 2023. They said, in effect, we want a path out of the private market. We want control of the future of our homes. That kicked off a 2-year collaboration. We worked closely with the tenants, with Prado Group, and with public agencies to put together the financing and negotiate a purchase. The tenants kept organizing, and the corporate landlord tried to pick them off one by saying, if you go off your rent strike, we'll forgive your debt. But they stuck together. And eventually, we looked for funding. We turned over every couch cushion we could. We went to the city. The city didn't have money. Fortunately, BAFA, the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority, did have funding for us. And in December 2024, we were able to purchase the building. And it really shows what's possible when community groups, public agencies, and mission-driven lenders work together. Today, the long-term overdue repairs are underway, and stability is a promise realized. And I want to share that video, that story in Luis and Matthew's words themselves.
Lo que más me gusta de aquí de la misión es de que todos los, más que nos gusta a los latinos, las fruterías están cerca, el transporte público lo tengo cerca y el calor latino.
The mission has changed enormously. In terms of the speed of gentrification, the cost of living is jumping up. There is a feeling that your time is really short. When the large corporate landlord bought the building, instantly things changed. Our rents went up right away, hundreds and hundreds of dollars. A lot of people in the building were frightened. They were thinking that they were going to just kick everyone out. The land trust came to us and said, we actually do have some funds there and you guys are on the top of our list.
Me gustó la idea y compartí esa idea con las demás personas. Y cuando las demás personas aceptaron, ya, todos estamos de acuerdo.
We're part of the neighborhood and we are part of this larger process of people uniting and working together.
Es como que andes algo pesado en tu espalda y te lo hayas quitado. Yo siento hoy que mi hogar es mi casa y mi casa es ahí.
Thank you. So let's talk about some of the things that worked and some of the tensions that we're wrestling with. So as I mentioned at the top, the Union at Home ordinance was instrumental in making this happen. This was passed in 2022, and it is an ordinance that says in buildings of 5 or more units where more than half the residents agree to be part of a union, it must be recognized by the landlord as a housing service. So it's on par with their obligation to provide things like habitable living situations. They actually have to come meet and confer with the residents and negotiate on things of like rent increases, like housing conditions. It's been a huge tool for us in San Francisco. I know Berkeley just passed a measure to do that. I think it's a really important tool to creating the foundation of a successful CLT. It's residents who are already working together, who are creating collective demands and deciding the future of their housing. And I want to take a minute actually just to shout out a couple folks in the back. Who went on the farm worker co-op bus tour yesterday? Raise your hand. I know that a couple of the residents mentioned at the end of that tour, La Unión es la fuerza. The union is the power. And I really do believe that much like our friends here from Fresno, these kind of tools to create unions and recognize them legally are such an important foundation to cooperative community ownership. One tactic we used in this was media leverage. I think it's a really important aspect of the work we do with our residents. Our residents have incredible stories to share, and having them share their stories in public media, it really empowers them to share that story. And I think, you know, one thing that was mentioned in a previous presentation was putting pressure on elected officials. elected officials read newspapers. They have thin skin. They want to look good in front of their constituents. So sharing their stories in a public media is a really important tool. In this instance, we used this to try to pressure FIP to be funded. Didn't quite come through, but it did raise the story of these residents. And when we came back to the district supervisor, they were well aware and they wanted to work with us to find a solution. Just a few tensions in general in San Francisco when a property goes from the private market into the city's small sites program. Currently, tenants lose rent control, and that's a big tension with tenant organizers. We were very fortunate in this instance because we got regional funding. We were able to retain a lot of those protections, but it's something we're actually working with tenant organizers to fix legally. There's an ordinance pending to maintain those rent control protections. And that's really an important step towards making sure that we're working hand in glove with those tenant organizers. And then another sort of general tension, maintaining the long-term affordability, making sure rents aren't astronomically high. It's really in tension with the long-term asset management towards making sure we have the reserves that we need to make long-term repairs. So I think transparency is a really key aspect of sort of resolving that tension. I have a coda for us. This is news that just happened yesterday. I mentioned Veritas Investments at the top, and you all booed and hissed. Thank you. Um, they just announced yesterday that they are in imminent risk of foreclosure on 66 of their properties. They have a business model that doesn't work. They are vulture capitalists. And I actually think it's a really important um, announcement for two reasons. One is the Veritas Tenants Association, who organized, demanded better conditions, and refused to pay more in rent. They brought that corporation to their knees. And now they are at risk of foreclosure. Also, it dawned on me, Veritas really bought most of its properties in the sort of post 2008 foreclosure crisis. They don't last. We last. We build housing that lasts. We have residents who are invested in their futures, and that means a lot for us as a movement. We need to continue to do this, and we need to buy all the properties that Veritas is in foreclosure on. All right. So with that, I know we're running short on time, so we're gonna do a quick moderated Q&A, and then I want to open it up to folks in the audience. So we'll start with our resident panelists. I want to know, I know a lot of the folks in this room want to know, what was your initial impression of the Community Land Trust when you first engaged with it? And what specific steps or actions helped build trust between you and the CLT?
Yes, when they came to our doors, when they were door knocking, we would listen to what they would share, but in reality, we would think, is that even possible? And so we would stay with that impression of, no, probably not. But as we started meeting more often and creating a stronger relationship, we started to believe that, yes, maybe it is possible. And it was a really long fight. And we also started to notice that there was other people that were also in the similar struggle and were also in support. And that's when we started to gain more confidence and decided, we are going to continue. We're going to continue. When we got to the last city council meetings, there was even more people there fighting for our cause. And in the end, it left the city council members no other option but to support us.
Maybe just as a follow-up, what advice would you offer other CLTs or organizers to ensure residents feel heard and central to the process?
Well, maybe in that case, again, I would recommend that they meet, that they be discussing what it is that they want to achieve, to not lose that perspective. Because once residents lose faith and believe that they're not going to be able to achieve this, then things kind of end there. And instead, being able to continue to fight for this dream, it is still a dream. and dreams are possible to achieve. So staying constant in the struggle.
Great, thank you. One of the big overarching questions um, that I know a lot of us in the room wrestle with is trust. Right. It's right there in our name. But when it comes to how trust applies to CLT residents, it's not a given. It's something that I think has to be earned. So I'm curious, for the folks up here, how do you balance being in the nonprofit housing space, where we exist as housing providers, not landlords, and collaborating with tenants? What are ways that have worked in the past and maybe ways that haven't worked that you've learned from?
Like my compañera shared, it was a constant struggle. We had a lot of doubts. We didn't even know what community land trusts were. And we would say, like, who are they? Why are they interested in helping us? If in this country people don't help one another, really. And so we started getting more involved, getting more information. And we started seeing a little light of hope. And they were beginning to, help take away a lot of those doubts, such as where are we going to go? Do we have to leave San Jose because it's really expensive here and we don't have the resources to move to another unit? And so all 18 families had the same worry. And since we have a lot of years living in the apartments, where are we going to go to work? Or, what kind of new neighbors are we going to get? With what kind of confidence, trust are we going to leave our kids behind while we go to work? It's a lot of worries and a lot of doubts that had us sad, that had us stressed out. But we would have more meetings with them and we would get more involved. And we realized, there are people out there that are worried about us. And if they are worried about us, like, we have to also give more than our 100% and get involved and get more informed, go to the meetings, continue to persist. When we would have Zoom meetings with the council members, they would have really persistent questions such as, why do you want to stay there? What do you want from there? What is your expectation of by not wanting to leave? Like, they kind of were questioning if it was really, us fighting for this, or if it was the organization is putting us there just to speak. But since these were our personal stories, our personal experiences, and these Zoom meetings, we noticed their faces, we saw their reactions, that they would get sad hearing our story. And so that was an important point to start to, move them to, sometimes it'd be about 3 to 4 people from the city council, meeting with the different city council members, and they would come with their own questions. And the people from our side that would be representing the 18 families, we would share our testimonies, we would share our struggle. And I think they started to realize that these 18 families, are interested. And personally, there was a council member that when I shared my story, my testimony, he shared, since I am from this area, I feel committed to advocate for you and your family. And he did, and he achieved that.
Thank you. I mean, I think that highlights that the path can be long. It can require perseverance. So I'd wonder from either Delma or Matt, can you share like one tool, resource, practice that has been helpful for keeping residents engaged and keeping the momentum going on your end?
Yeah, oh yeah, I can. So what I have to share covers like probably all of our questions that we're asking here. And I think like something that I've seen in the year and a half that I've been at Bay Area CLT, which has had a lot of turnover over the years. I mean, there are multiple staff like sitting in here looking at me right now in the room who have worked at Bay Area CLT over the years. And I think like very luckily we brought on, as I mentioned before, a co-op program manager, Rebecca, last year, who is a resident in the Bay Area Community Land Trust. And to have her on staff and to have her be dedicated to meeting with Paula, how often do you meet with Rebecca? Like once a month? Every single resident group she meets with at least once a month. Do training, get feedback. It is so, so helpful to have someone on the staff team who is also a resident who can advocate and understand, like, wait a minute, this thing that we're talking about doing is like not really a good idea, to have that voice in the room on a day-to-day basis. It's also helpful to have structures like accountability structures, like board membership, where we have Paula's on the board. We have 4 out of 12 board members at BACLT are residents, and then we have another 3 who are like alternate resident members. And so there's like 7 folks in every single board meeting and serving on committees that are always paying attention to the decision making and participating and voting in the decision making like of the entire organization. And so um, resident board members have decided to create a resident council and an additional body, which is great to like organize residents within and outside of the board to connect collectively across properties and to be able to like just share knowledge and resources, but also advocate internally toward the organization to shape our practice, right? And so I think, yeah, democracy is a lot of work, but like, you know, I think if we talk about in the CLT movement right now, there's 3 sessions about like resident voice, resident engagement, tenant governance. If we're going to take these ideas seriously, I think we need robust accountability, like robust tenant, like resident held accountability structures that are going to keep the organizations from drifting towards the nonprofit affordable housing industrial complex like model, right? So that's what hope I have for the CLT movement is that like we can pull not just ourselves, but like the rest of the industry in this direction.
Thank you, Matt. You want to add anything, Delma? Okay, if not.
That was really well said. Yeah, I think if anything, I think just highlighted the um yeah, maybe I just highlighted the collective decision making that was I think that was a really big value at when working with the Virginia residents and also ensuring that we're like um again that the residents are leading throughout the process and yeah I think um yeah I think yeah residents being able to make sure that I think it was really as one of the organizers I feel like it was uh easy in terms of like working with the residents because they have been like such a big already have like roots in the community and in East Side San Jose. So it was being able to make sure that like the residents or voice in the story was able to be highlighted. So I think just throughout the collective decision making throughout the whole process was really big. Yeah, and ensuring that as Matt said, ensuring that we're able to offer that space for residents to lead throughout this process because I do feel like this is a tool. Community land trust is a tool for decommodification, but it's a tool that residents need to be leading and using throughout this process. And yeah, so I think that.
Thank you. I know we're short on time, so I want to hear from y'all. So we're gonna open it up for Q&A. Teresa from SFCLT is gonna help us out on this. Teresa volunteered to help make this conference happen on the ops side. So give it up for Teresa first, and now leave your hands up to ask questions.
Hi, thanks. My name is Zach Murray with ACE, and just wanted to just say a lot of praise and thanks to the residents from South Bay CLT for all the work you did over the years to get that acquisition through. Really amazing to hear about that. And my question is, when you have a landlord that is, so it sounds like sometimes there's a favorable landlord who's willing to sell, but oftentimes with ACE, we are in buildings where the landlords are harassing tenants, and are not really willing to work with land trust partner if they find that there's an alliance between them and the tenant organizing. So I'm wondering your advice in those instances where you have a problematic landlord who isn't as willing to sell. What ways you help to get the properties out of that person's hands and into the land trust? Thank you.
It's a great question. Is OCLT in the room? Alex, you want to take that, Alex?
Hey, I'm Alex from OCLT. Um, I mean, I think the way that OCLT has approached it, and I wasn't really at OCLT for any of those acquisitions, so most of this is storytelling and passing down information. But I think in those situations, OCLT has often played like coordinated with the tenants, and most of those tenants were ACE tenants who were really fired up, really um, felt righteous indignation and a sense of injustice, and went to the homes of the landlords and protested outside the building, got a lot of media coverage. I think media was really critical to the work that we did. And OCLT kind of played this role of like coordinating, working really closely with the tenants, making decisions with them and following their lead, but also kind of on the outside being more like I don't want to use good cop, bad cop language because I don't believe in that, but like the tenants would be like, "Ah," and we'd be like, oh man, it's a shame that, this man, these guys seem like a lot of work. Maybe just like get rid of the building. We could take it off your hands. I mean, we're here. You guys aren't ready yet, but when you're ready, well, we'll be here. It's kind of my understanding how a lot of those acquisitions went down. Um, and but without that pressure coming from the outside, without that media attention, without um yeah, then it would not, that would not have happened.
Saki, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so just curious because exactly for what Alex just said about sometimes it's very helpful to have an independent outside organization that's the tenant organizer that's helping to, basically organize and do the rent strike and like be that, agitator, whereas the land trust sort of like, okay, we're here to help, but like you said, like tell us when you're sick of this, like let's, but it's hard to be both. And what I'm very impressed by, especially with South Bay, it sounds like you guys are the organizers, correct? You didn't work with a tenant organizing organization. So I'm just wondering about the tension that you find there and just in being the organizer and at the same time, the developer who's also going to go ahead and develop the property, whether you found that difficult. And then, maybe to Matt also, like in thinking about working in Berkeley, where there isn't a very strong tenant movement, right? And there isn't like ACE is not super active there. We work with Housing Rights Committee. Wondering how you're kind of thinking about that.
Yeah, thank you. Uh, First, I also want to acknowledge that the Virginia Avenue Apartments is based on the Mayfair community in East Side of San Jose. So I know that the residents had been already working there with some of the nonprofit organizations that had been doing organizing work, like Mayfair Community Center. They actually are the ones who connected the residents to South Bay CLT. And so the residents there had been already been, doing some organizing work. But in terms of like that tension, I do, yes, like we the work that we do when connecting with the residents was both organizing work and also working toward like the connecting with the former property owner, right? And there were definitely in terms of like, since it took us more than 3 years, a little bit more than 3 years, it took some time. There were some times where the property owner um would share like, hey, like you're taking some time, like I think we might, go on a different route. And we were like, wait, hold up, what? Like, no, let's like invite her over, like let's at least invite her over, like let's like, organize like some tension around this. But I think just mentioning again like how you're saying uh those roles, and we were able to connect it with the tenants about this, like, hey, like we the property owner, former property owner was um is like is sharing that, yeah, they we let them know. And then the resident said like, let's go ahead and send them a letter, like let's ask for more time. So they all, sent a letter. They everybody signed. And so I think just we were trying to find, I guess, different ways to like both um organize and like yeah, ways where we could still be bridging that with a property owner, and still and also keep her and I think for this experience, this owner, her mother was had bought the building. She was a teacher at the very like near elementary school, and had bought the building to be able to support like families and offer affordable housing. Um, so we were so it's in a trust, right? So we'd always try to and shout out to like Josefina Aguilera, our executive director, who always reminded like throughout the negotiation process of just like the values that we hold and that we um hold with that property owner. So I know this is very specific to like this experience here, but yeah, at least for us it was that being able to yeah, I think um be able to hold those two and and then also be able to like, we would call on some of our partners as well to like send out letters as well, and to council members, so then that we could also receive that support as well. And also I just want to shout out Liz, who is our co-founder, board president, who started organizing at the Virginia residence of apartment. So in case you want to add anything too.
Saki, to your question about Berkeley, and then I see Roberto's hand back there too. Um, yeah, actually, Berkeley, as Kyle mentioned earlier, like we, the voters, passed last year a tenant right to organize and unionize policy, which went into effect on January 1st of this year, I think. So Berkeley Tenants Union, which is all volunteer run, but needs to be funded. Are there funders in the room? Like, say it again for the people in the back. Berkeley Tenants Union has been going around the city, unionizing groups of tenants. Last I heard, they had half a dozen tenant unions already formed. And I mean, they're literally knocking on doors of like every single building in the city. Their goal is to create like chapters of tenant unions, like UAW style, like all the way across the city, right? And so I think this is a great model. Like we are very early on in like starting to explore what collaboration with PTU looks like in this. But to me, this is what the ecosystem needs to look like. You have the established tenant unions who are forming up, building relationships, learning how to organize together to make demands upon the landlord and the property owners. And then the CLTs are there, and we are connected in conversation with tenant unions to when they get to a point where they want to force a sale, or the owner is ready to sell for some other reason. We move, we go, right, and we're ready. And of course, you need funding available, right? There's a whole ecosystem, like a pipeline of stuff that needs to be there. But I'm really excited to see how the tenant unionizing in Berkeley in a more structured way, with the backing of the law, right, is going to help facilitate more successful CLT decommodifications in the future.
And maybe just to add one more thing to that, I mean, I think you make a good point that like the conditions have to be right, the funding has to be there. But I actually think like that solidarity relationship between CLTs and tenant organizers is the political base to do things like pass funding measures to be able to do the work we do. So on a political power scale, like I think that is bigger than just an individual building. That is actually the power base that's going to move the needle.
Raise first, start here, and then I'll go. Hi. So our community land trust, has a strong tenant organizing partner in the Chinese Progressive Association in Boston. Um, and there are a number of buildings where, we have been working together with the tenants for years, but we haven't been able to get those owners to sell to us. And then on the other hand, we have acquired occupied properties where we didn't know the tenants at all, and the tenants don't even know each other. And so it's like very easy for me to see how we can work, more collectively with the tenants that we've been organizing, but it's much harder where we just suddenly became these people's landlord. And I'm just interested in kind of like how do you bring people, you were talking about in Berkeley, like working at different, you know, stages of um, resident empowerment and, governance of buildings, and just interested in how you do that in buildings where you weren't organizing or there wasn't organizing.
Hey, Paula, you want to answer this one? No? Okay, okay. I'm asking because Paula lives in a building in this situation, right?
Hi, I'm Paula from Bay Area Community Land Trust. I'm a resident, and so basically, what it is, it's a lot of empowering through education. And thanks to the Bay Area Community Land Trust, we're getting that kind of like step by step of how to build it together. Trying to maintain that vision of what the end goal is, which is to become eventually a collective. So basically, it's all education and having that communication with our land trust, so that way we can all learn together and kind of just get everybody in the mix and basically just all have that same vision that this is why we're doing it. These are the steps. We're getting all the tools. We're meeting with our with our community, with our members, and we're also meeting with the community land trust. They're basically lending all their time, a lot of their time, and we're structuring in a way that we can all learn from. So that's how I see it. Thank you guys.
So as you walk to the next question, yeah, I would just add to summarize, like uh, with Paula's experience and other resident groups, like it's just an extra like long time, intentional time of like cultivating relationships between residents and the land trust and also amongst residents. It's like community building for like a year or two before you can start doing the other stuff. It takes time.
Yep. Yeah, my question's, after you have an organized building, you acquire the building, like what kind of temporary structure exists? And I think like it's a good question for South Bay. Is that of like what kind of resident governance model do you have set up right now for the tenants to have decision making and ma- or like what are you working towards? Yeah, and maybe the same thing for the Bay Area folks in terms of like in transition to like a limited equity housing co-op or a co-op, like what kind of resident governance do you set up in the meantime?
Okay. I'll start it, pero si quieren agregar algo más. Okay. For us, well, initially it was just like mainly the tenant meetings, holding tenant meetings, and a lot of it would be us sharing a little bit more of like the situation, what's happening, maybe sharing more of the like tenant rights, and as we um as we continued to meet more frequently, we began to um add like different roles, like if it's like adding the icebreakers or like the note taker or um um yeah, timekeeper, like, or maybe we usually Salve CLT, like we bring food, but then like we noticed that sometimes like like folks began to like bring maybe snacks or like food to, so I think began to like um building those roles, where like the residents can also participate in, and then also like for folks um who like maybe weren't able to make it to the meeting, like also the residents would like share out like, okay, el vecino, the neighbor wasn't able to make it, but I'm gonna connect with them, so like that itself also is a role, so at the moment that's something that we're like, it's not like perfect, but we're practicing of just like and then residents like also being involved in um creating like the agenda as well, because yeah, creating that agenda. And at the moment we're like we have began at the very first conversation with the residents, we began talking about like different ownership models, but we haven't dove into them yet, as we're like preparing for the rehab, but that is something that we're working towards. But I know that like all these different roles are helping us build up, to having the goal is for like the residents to be able to lead those meetings, right? And then for us to be able to, we are working on a like a resident curriculum that includes all like that governance or that transition of collective ownership and what that looks like, and then also um there was another piece, but I think it's like as Matt said, it's not just from like one day to another, or and that's also something that we don't like are not forcing on. It's like something that we're like building, together, yeah, collectively. So yeah, if you wanna add any or see what's gonna agregar algo.
I'll just add that at SFCLT, we have 16 properties, one of which is a limited equity housing cooperative. It's our oldest property, acquired in 2009. They have a structure, they have a nonprofit board, they meet regularly, they make decisions. We have three self-managed co-ops, which structurally are similar to the tenant-landlord relationship, but they do also make collective decisions on certain matters, specifically financial matters. The rest are more of like the traditional landlord-tenant relationship. We did bring on a co-op program manager in the last year, and she is figuring out specifically in our newer acquisitions, like what does that structure look like, particularly like deputizing residents to start to meet, to make decisions, and get them on that path towards a collective ownership. I think the challenge that we face is a lot of the properties where the residents are most at risk of displacement often don't have the bandwidth to really dive in to be part of that collective decision making. So making sure we're doing everything we can to meet our residents where they're at, to give them that bandwidth to be able to do that work, is something that is front of mind for us. But always good to learn from peers, if you have any suggestions on that as well. I know we're close to time. Probably one more question.
Hey y'all. Um, how we doing? Matt with the Beverly Vermont Community Land Trust. Um, I love this panel because it's so crucial to talk about organized buildings for CLTs. We have limited resources, especially like if we're organizing or with partners. But one of the things I've noticed that like you raised in your piece also is like these tension points about expectations and what bet this shift. There's clearly a shift when you start or when you're organizing against a landlord versus organizing towards an acquisition. And I wonder what that transition looks like so that we can have better expectations with tenant associations who may not be so like close mesh with CLTs. Does that question make sense?
Can you rephrase?
Like, what is the shift between like organizing versus a landlord versus organizing towards an acquisition?
Are you saying like how do we work with folks who like have that organizing background in their building and like
Do
we're
you get
trying to
me?
move towards CLT
Yeah, like you.
collaboration? Yeah, go for it, Alex.
I think one of the things that we've struggled with is that, particularly with the super organized campaigns to acquire a building, there's this intense energy and tension, and everyone comes together and they're like, landlord, like all landlords are bastards, rent strike, ah. And then we acquire the building, and then we've reached this major milestone, and we celebrate, and we've done it, but we haven't done it yet. We have so much more work to do, and that energy and that excitement begins to dissipate as we're waiting for funding, and we're trying to recollect ourselves and figure out a strategy, and some of that goodwill and like mutual solidarity that existed during the campaign begins to fall apart a little bit. And for a while, folks were like, "Oh man, my neighbor was like parking in my spot, but I don't care because we're in this together." But now, oh, they're parking in my parking spot. Oh, that really ain't, it, like frustrates me. Um, and then there's this like reframing of what is the victory? Is the victory to take the housing off the speculative market, or is it to have um, for y'all to be the owners, to have this real community ownership project? And that, which I think for us, particularly in the context of the campaign oriented projects, that has been a challenge to go from this campaign that is like hot to a campaign that is cold, cold in the sense of like not fiery. And I think for some of our projects that have been in that category, it's taken like in some cases like a year or two for like tension to simmer down a little bit, and to like I think in some cases we've had tenants who've turned that anger back towards us, where like we, you know, they're organizing against this slumlord who was not doing repairs, and then we get barely scrape together the funds to buy the building, but we are not able to do those repairs as quick as we would like to. And then there's this expectation of like, well, I thought you guys were going to do the repairs, and I thought you were going to do all these things that we're still trying to figure out how to do. And so I don't really have an answer, Matt, but I think that that is such an important part of this conversation, is like really, I think we really need to do a lot of work on the front end to set expectations and really define what the path is, and what the like celebration points are. Because if it's just to get to, we acquire the building and now we're just the landlords and we have a friendly relationship and we're not going to raise your rent, then that's a different one than like we are working towards this thing together and here are limitations, and it's really frustrating that all these things aren't fitting together. We're working as hard as we can to figure it out. Um, yeah. Can be.
Time for maybe one more comment, but then we
That's that. I mean, we made the point that there's like curriculum and programming that's really supportive in getting folks prepared for stewardship. I think maybe that's where what you use to fill the gap, right? Like you've got time because you got to get your money and financing together. So if we have the forward thinking and we have the curriculum in place, so between your milestone of making the acquisition, then we're still continuing with like consistent points for folks to come together. Maybe there's a monthly meeting that happens anyway, right? And we can be instilling that programming during that time, because there is a huge shift in transition from like adversarial organizing for a building to long organizing to maintain that building. So maybe you're filling in the with programming there.
thank you. And I know we're over time, so
I just want to say
and
that
go ahead, close.
that was a learning process, and we're doing that now. But I just wanted to name that tension, that we've been putting a lot of work into learning from those lessons.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you to our panelists. And yeah.